we're going to jump right in. I'm going to just start talking about InDesign, and we're going to do that for the next 2 days. Sound like a good plan? All right, cool. Yeah, InDesign is, first of all, I need to kind of explain what it is. A lot of people think, I don't really know what it is. What do I use it for? Well, it's part of the Creative Suite. Not necessarily, you don't necessarily have the whole suite, but I'm guessing you guys probably do. And that's what I run into a lot, are people that are photographers that have only used Photoshop. Maybe they've kind of looked at Illustrator and it scared them and they went back to Photoshop. That's how I feel when I go to Photoshop. I get a little scared and I run away, even though I've been using Photoshop since version 1. And what are they on, version 15 or 13 or something like that? I've been using it since version 1. And so InDesign is a page layout program. So you basically take all your other elements that you get from the other places, Photoshop, Illustrator, or other programs like that. But I'm going to pretty much just use those because I figure most of us are in that Adobe workflow. So you take your photos from Photoshop and you take all your vector images, your drawings, and we're going to talk about the differences between the two. You take that and you put it together, and you might have some type elsewhere, but for the most part you want to put type in InDesign. And we put it all together, and then we do something with that. We either print it, or we make PDFs, or we make digital books, or whatever. There's a lot of different things that we can do. And actually tomorrow, that's what we're going to talk about at the end of the day, is output, and different types of output and different considerations for output. But that's something I want you to be thinking of as you're working along, either today with me or when you go to work on your project, is what's happening to this at the end. It's kind of like if you just said, oh, I'm going to take some photos and start working them in Photoshop, but you don't really know what you're doing with those photos. You just took a picture and hoped it was good enough. But no, I know when you're out there, you're considering, lens and lighting and what the final product is, right? So it's the same kind of thing. What am I doing with this product at the end? Is it going to print? There's a lot of different considerations than if I'm just making a PDF to look at on the web page or something like that. So always be keeping that in mind as well. And we're going to talk about those as we go along, but that's just something to think about before you jump in and start doing stuff. Because like in Photoshop, if I suddenly just start creating something in Photoshop and I've made it 72 DPI and it needs to go to print, and I'm already throwing out terms at you. We haven't even started with 2 minutes in and we're throwing out resolution terms. But you think about these things ahead of time and you realize if I don't do that at the beginning, I can't go back and magically add it. We talked about magic being the key yesterday. Yeah, we got to create our own magic today. So that's kind of the key to things today. So I just want to keep in mind to think about what you're doing with the product before we start it. So then we need to actually launch InDesign or open it. And I'm starting from the very beginning with this, how to open the application, what it looks like, what the icons look like. And there's a lot of different icons for InDesign because there's all these InDesign related files we're going to create. And your icons might look different depending what version you have, because Adobe loves to change their icons. So there's always a little different look when we get into things. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find where the application is. It's either sitting in the Applications folder, perhaps. You might have it in a dock. If you're on a Mac, you might have it down in your dock here. You might have it in your Start menu if you're on a PC. And I have to remember today to use my PC commands as well, because sometimes I forget that everybody's on different applications. Yesterday, I was on a Mac-only program, and I was like, I don't have to remember any PC commands. This is great. But I will try and remember and shout those out to you. So you can actually, like I say, come down here to your dock and look for the icon. It may be in there. If it's not, you can put it in there. It might be in your Applications folder. And it might also be you might have a file just sitting here. And actually, I'm going to copy this out to the desktop just so I can see it kind of big and we can look what the icon looks like. All right, so that's what the CS6 icon looks like. It's going to look fairly similar in some of the earlier versions, but the thing that will remain the same is the extension. .indd. If you have your extensions showing, you may or may not on your desktop. But if you don't, you can always get information on the file and do that. But .indd is an InDesign document file. So you can double click on an existing file if you'd like. I'm going to actually launch mine from the dock, and I'm going to be presented with the new document that's here, or just my layout. And it probably will look something like that. It may or may not. You may actually be able to see the desktop back behind, and I'll show you why that is in a minute. But you probably will be greeted with this big gray nothingness that's there. Right? So we want to actually create a new document or open one from scratch. So I can go up to the File menu. Let me make sure I have my mouse posse turned on. There we go. We can go up to the File menu and choose Open and navigate out to a file. And like I said, there's a lot of different InDesign documents that might be out there. But the INDD is an InDesign document as is, not one of the peripheral files. And I would open that. But what I want to do is I want to actually create a new document, because we're going to go in and we're going to look at all the parameters that we have to put in to a new document. And again, this is thinking ahead to what we're going to do with this file. So I'm going to do File, New, and choose New Document. We get our new document dialog box. We're going to go over some of these, most of these. If you don't see everything that's down here, if you don't see bleed and slug, especially down here at the bottom, you want to make sure that you click this button that says more options. Adobe has this thing where they like to close up all their stuff, and sometimes the only thing that's hidden, it's not really saving any space, it's one thing. And that's the one thing you need, and you can't find it until you remember, click more options. So I just always am telling myself, look for the more options button if I can't find it when I'm sure it's in this panel or this dialog box. So click that, you get a few more options that are down there. I'm going to skip over the section at the top, this document preset first, because that's the last thing we're going to do in this new dialog box. I'm going to come down here to intent, and in CS5, your choice was print or web. And in CS5, I believe it was the same. And in CS6, they added digital publishing. Digital publishing, if you're doing the digital magazines, you're going to use it and integrate with the Android apps, or you're going to integrate with Apple's newsstand on the iPad. That is what you would choose as digital publishing. If you're going to go to the web, or you're going to make a PDF that's only going to be read either on the web or on a device, you could probably choose web for that. I'm going to choose print. Print gives me the most control. If I feel like I'm going to go to print and other applications, I will choose print, because print is giving me the higher standards that I need for printing something, and then I can always, as I say, dumb it down later to the web, right? So I can always worry about that later. So I'm going to choose print. It's going to ask me how many pages I want in my document. I'm going to start with one. I can always add them on the fly. Unless you know you've got a 12-page document, I never know how long my document's going to be. So I keep it as one page. And I have this option of facing pages or not. I prefer not to have them on. That's a total preference. Facing pages, basically, you'll notice it changes the margins down here. If you watch the margins down here at the bottom, when I choose facing pages, it changes it from having a margin where it feels like, or if I don't have facing pages, I have standalone pages, it sees each page as its own thing. So I have a top, bottom, right, and left margin, edge of my page. By doing facing pages, it's going to put two of them together in what's called a spread. And so it knows that where those two pages hit each other is the inside margin, and these are the outside margins. So a lot of people for books like the facing pages. I just personally don't, because everything I do is in facing pages, or in non-facing pages, and then I export to a PDF. If I'm going to print, most printers will want to actually take those single pages and do what's called pagination by themselves, either through their printing software or something like that. They want to manually do it. So I like to give everybody single pages. Again, it's a preference. And we'll see that when we get into the Pages panel later. I'm going to skip the primary text frame for right now. We're going to talk about that when we get to Master Pages. I'm going to leave that unchecked. I can choose a page size from here. So I have some that are built in. Some of these are kind of created on the fly, the ones at the top. These are the ones that you'll probably see, the letter, legal. You've got some European sizes as well. You've also got a US business card and a compact disc. I love the compact disc one. It's basically just the little booklet that goes in a compact disc, for like 4 3/4 squared, something like that. So I'm going to choose something easy like letter. If I don't like the sizes that are there, I can always create one on the fly. I can come down here and either use the up and down arrow keys to change the size, or I can select everything in this box and type in a new size. Maybe we're going to do a postcard. We want it to be 6, and I'm going to hit tab. It's going to bring me to the next box and do 6 by 4. And when I do that and hit tab again, you notice my orientation changed, because it knows that it's 6 inches wide, so it's a landscape orientation. It's wide as opposed to a portrait. So I can flip those two back and forth. And here's a little tip. Instead of trying to select all the text that's in a frame or in a box, anytime you put a value or anything inside a box in InDesign, if you just click once on the icon or the word to the left of the box, it selects everything. Saves you a lot of clicking, saves you repetitive stress injuries. I'm just trying to help out. So I just know that sometimes when I try and triple click, I usually end up getting something like everything but the N, and I type in 4, and it says, sorry, 4N is not valid, right? So just a little tip there. How many columns we want to have in this text? Now this is not going to make my text frames all be 2 columns if I change that. It just means it's making margins on the page. It's going to take the amount of space that we had minus the margins, and it's going to make it 2 column and put a column line down the middle. But I still have to make 2 column text frames. So for me, unless I'm doing a newsletter that I know every page is going to be laid out the same, I leave it at 1 column, because at any time when we're in a page, we can always change that. So I just tend to leave that. But if you do want to put columns, you can, and you can put gutter, and that's how much space is between each of the columns that's there. So maybe we want a 1/4 inch space between each. All right, so we could do that if we wanted. Margins is pretty important, especially if you're going to print. But even if you're not going to print, nobody likes to see something go all the way to the edge. Even on a PDF, you wouldn't want your text to be all the way at the edge of your virtual paper, right? It just kind of looks weird. We're used to seeing a little space around the edges when we're reading a book or even a digital book. So a margin is just how much space between the edge of your copy and whatever else you have and the edge of the paper, and that's it. So for print, I might do something like a 1/4 inch margin, right? When I type in here, let's say I wanted this to be a little bit bigger. We're just gonna make this a 1/2 inch. And when I hit tab, you notice they all changed. So all of my measurements changed to 1/2 inch. And that's because of this little button right here. This says keep all measurement or settings the same. So when I typed in one, it automatically fills it in the other. I can click that and now it won't do that. Do you have a question?
Yeah, how did you get to inches for your measurements? Mine are like P
how
and
did
a
I get to
0.
inches? I will show you that in a second.
Okay.
It's actually set into, it's in our preferences. And we'll do that in just a second. We'll jump back out to that. So yeah, so make all measurements the same. Then if I have that turned off and I type in 1/4 inch and hit tab, only that measurement is going to be at 1/4 inch, right? So I can change that. So that really comes in handy when you're doing something like 0.3125 and not have to type that 4 times. So let's actually go back and make this my 1/4 inch. All right. And then bleed and slug, most people don't really use the slug anymore, so I'm not really going to talk about that. You may or may not use it. If you use it, you probably already know how to use it. But a bleed is what you need when you're printing. You need to have, if you want your image or your text or whatever to come all the way to the edge of the paper, you have to do what's called a bleed. So you can't print, even on a copier or on a press, you can't have stuff come all the way to the edge, because ink and toner wraps around the side of the paper. So it just doesn't work. And on a machine, you have to have somewhere to pull, so you can't have it coming all the way to the edge. So if you want text or images to come all the way to the edge, you have to extend the image past that by whatever amount we put in here, and then come back and trim the paper. So that's kind of what the bleed is. So if I want a picture to come all the way to the edge, and on an 8.5 by 11 sheet, I'd have to print it probably 9 by 12 with a bleed to accommodate this extra 1/8 of an inch all the way around. And then the reason we want to come past it and not just to the edge is because no matter what we're feeding it through paper-wise, it's going to bounce. And you'll get that sliver of white down the side otherwise. So we make it come all the way past the edge, so that even with the bounce, it's fine. Even if we trim it a little crooked, it's not going to be noticeable. All right, so that's what a bleed is. So we're going to go ahead and set an 1/8 of an inch bleed. And if you don't know how much bleed, if you're actually going to print, then ask the person who's printing it, what's a common bleed amount? And they're going to know what will work for them. So 1/8 of an inch is generally what I do. And before we say okay and open this document, I want to save this preset, because next time I set up the same exact thing, I don't want to have to go through this again. And actually, let me change this back to letter really quick, because we don't want to open a postcard. We want to work with the whole letter here. So I've set all these settings here, and I want to use that again and again. So I'm going to click Save Preset. So the great thing is we can have tons of presets. So what I do is I might call it what it is, describe it, call it, letter, 1/4 inch margin, and an 1/8 of an inch bleed, or something like that. I might call it ABC client letterhead, or postcard, or business cards with bleeds, or something like that. I would have something descriptive that makes sense to me. And I say okay. And then next time I go to create a new document, I just choose it from this pull down menu, right? So I just choose letter, 1/4 inch margin, 1/8 of an inch bleed. And then next time I just open that up, choose that, and click OK, and then I've got my new document. Before we look at the new document, I'm going to go into preferences and tell you how to change that before I forget. So when we're setting preferences for InDesign, most of them are only for the document that you have open. If you have a document open, you start changing preferences, you're only changing the preferences for this document. Some of them are what I call sticky. They're across all the different documents, but most of them are not. So what I do is because I can't remember which are which, and so I just want to be totally safe, I close any open documents, and any preferences you set with no document open becomes the default behavior for all new documents. Right? So we want to set preferences with nothing open. If you're on a PC, your preferences are under the Edit menu. If you're on a Mac, they're under the InDesign menu. So go down here to InDesign, Preferences, and I'm going to come down. I can either start with the General tab, which has a keyboard shortcut to it. We're going to talk about those in just a minute. I can come down here and find what I'm looking for. I want to come down to Units and Increments. And this is so that we can set it, because by default, it's in picas and points instead of inches, because everybody uses picas and points. I don't even use them anymore. I used to, but I don't anymore. Under the horizontal and the vertical ruler, choose your measurement. So if we're working in centimeters, whatever we need to work in, change it to whatever you want to work in. The great thing is you can always change that at any time. So I can actually, if I have rulers turned on, I just did an Apple R and they didn't turn on, so that's great. We will see if I can get those turned on. Show rulers. All right, well, I don't have a document open. If I had a document open, it would actually show up. So I'm going to do the new document again, use that preset that we just made, and say OK. And I have my rulers here. The great thing is even though my rulers are in inches, at any time, there's a little keyboard shortcut. You can right-click or control-click on a ruler and change them to another measurement just for this particular document. So that's kind of nice if you suddenly want to work in centimeters or millimeters. I do that all the time. I work in millimeters from time to time when I want a very small amount of space. You know, I don't know what 1/10 of an inch is. I know it's 1/10 of an inch, but in my mind, I work in 1/8 of inches. You know, I want to work with something very, very small. So we can always work in another unit, even though we have inches or whatever as our standard. And that works in any dialog box. If I go back to that new dialog box, I just did a Command or Control N, Control on a PC or Command on a Mac, N, to open up a new document. Anytime I'm filling in a value, I can use something other than whatever unit I've set up. So in this case, I might know that my page, I might have gotten something from Europe and it's set up in centimeters and I want to measure everything the same way, but I want to work in inches because that's how I work. But I'm measuring it and I said, oh, it's 25 millimeters wide or whatever. So I can come into any value box and type in 25 and I can type in cm for centimeters, and then when I hit tab, it actually converts it to inches for me, which is really nice. This comes in handy, especially for things like drop shadows. One of the drop shadow default is like 0.0975 inches. Again, I don't know what this is in my head. It's about 1/10 of an inch. What's 1/10 of an inch? I don't know. But I know my drop shadows look really good at 2 millimeters. So I'll type in 2 millimeters, 2 mm instead. So just know that you can do that in any value box if you need some other type of measurement. All right, let's go back to our new document that we created. So when we created this, I suddenly have this document. I have a lot of colored lines on here. And I'm going to zoom in. And I did my keyboard command and spacebar. So it should be Control and spacebar on a PC, I believe. And so when I open that up, I see all these different lines. So the black line here, you can kind of see that the black line is lined up at the 0 point. That is the edge of our document. So the black line all the way around is the size of our document. And even though I might be bleeding and running this on a 9x12 sheet or something at the end, I set up my document to the final trimmed size. So I set it up to 8.5 by 11. Even though I'm going to put bleed stuff out there, it's going to have to run on a bigger sheet of paper. Or maybe I am just making an 8.5 by 11 PDF, but I still like to have the bleed, so I make sure my image goes far enough that I also don't forget and not pull my image out far enough and you see that white sliver. Even on a PDF, that would bother me, right? So anyway, I set it up to the exact trim size. That's what the black line is. The purple line inside here, this is our margin. So what we want to make sure is that when we're putting stuff on this page, especially if we're going to print, I'm going to assume we're going to print for a lot of this today. So I'll talk about some of the other applications when it's not print. But for the most part, we set up this saying, we're going to print at least first. We're going to print this, whatever it is we're making, and then we're going to do something else with it, maybe digitally. So we want to make sure that we don't have anything closer to the edge than this purple line. And the reason for that is if we get too close, let's say we had a picture and it was really close, again, things shift when it gets printed. And if it's a little tilted, you're going to see that that image is a little off center on the page. So by having that nice 1/4 inch margin, it gives our eyes a buffer so we don't notice it. So that's what the purple line is. We want to keep everything inside that line. And the red line, appropriately, the red line is the bleed line, right? So the bleed, this is where if we want something to come to the edge, we actually draw it all the way out to this space here to give us that space to come back and trim it off. Does that make sense? All right, so I'm going to zoom out. I just did a Command or Control 0, which zooms out and fits everything in the page. Let's talk a little bit about some of the tools. So you guys are all familiar with Adobe products. You know they love their panels and their tools and their things docked on the side. And it's actually a really good system because you can keep neatly tucking things away. And the nice thing about InDesign is as you tuck it away, your canvas gets bigger to work on. So if you're working on a laptop, especially like you all are today, it's a great way to keep things, give yourself more real estate on the screen. So let's talk about some of the tools first or some of the panels first, and the first one is the toolbox. So I'm just going to I'm going to come over here. This is the toolbox. And by default, this is one long strip, and we can make some changes to that. But I'm going to grab this little gray bar, and and I'm just going to grab it and drag it, and it's going to float. And when I do that, you notice that gave me more room off to the left side. It made my canvas a little bit bigger. And the next thing I'm going to do is hit these little double arrows at the top, and I just want to hit them one more time. I want these in a double column. And again, that's just a preference. I just like them all side by side. And we're going to look at a couple of the tools now, but for the most part, we'll look at the tools as we get to each section. Some of them are very specific. But a couple that I want you to be familiar with to start with are the 2 pointer tools. You notice there's 2 of them. If you've been in any other page layout program, there was always one. PageMaker was that way, Quark is that way, was that way, I don't know if it still is. But there was one, and it kind of flip-flopped as you needed it, and InDesign's getting closer to learning which one you need and flipping it. But it is kind of confusing that there's 2 of them, and I'll make sure we know the terminology by the end of the day. We're going to be using them over and over again. We have the selection tool, which is the solid tool or the black arrow tool, and then we have the direct selection tool. If you notice, I have these tooltips that are just popping up in the way. I'm also going to change that preference really quick because sometimes having all those yellow boxes, that can get kind of annoying actually. So what I want to do is make sure that I have those going back in my preferences, so edit preferences on a PC or InDesign preferences on a Mac. And I just want to tell it that we have the tooltips right here under the interface tab. I just want to tell it normal, and that just gives me a couple seconds of hovering before that pops up. I just find that to be a little less annoying. I can move my cursor around and not have those yellow boxes. But the nice thing is if I do need to know what something's called, and also they've really gotten really good at the tooltips, and they've started explaining when you roll over something what it is you can do with that tool. So that's really handy as well. So let's go back to our pointer tools. We've got our selection tool, the solid tool, or the hollow tool, which is the direct selection tool. And the difference being that when you use the selection tool, the solid one, that's when we're working with frames or containers. So as we start looking at putting images in, we put images, we have the image frame and the image itself. When we're working with the frame or the container, we use the solid tool. When we're working with the content of that frame, we use the direct selection tool. And we'll see that as we go along, of course. We also have a type tool down here, the little T that's here. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit, see if we can see this. So on the T tool, you notice there's a little bit of, there's a little triangle at the bottom. And that just means that there's more tools underneath. There's an actual hidden tool underneath there. If I click and hold that, my tools pop out. So I have some other tools that are hidden. Otherwise, your toolbox would be just massive. So they put a lot of them together. So if I click and hold on that, I can see all sorts of other tools that are hidden underneath there. All right, so the type tool has one of those. And we'll actually look at that tool and what the hidden tool actually does as well. So the type tool, that's for creating type frames, working with type, working also with tables, which is also just type. So anytime we're working with type, we're going to use the type tool. The other thing that you notice when we roll over the tool is that it has the little keyboard shortcut next to it. And you notice it's just a letter T. That's really great until you have your cursor in a text frame and you're typing T to hit the text tool or whatever tool you're trying to hit, and you're just typing T's all the way across or whatever. I do that a lot for one of the other ones whose keyboard shortcut is W, and I'm like, why is it not changing? And I realize I just typed woo across my type frame. So we want to kind of keep an eye out for that. And we're going to talk about keyboard shortcuts in a minute. We can actually change those if we don't like them. So that's the type tool. We're going to use that a lot today. And the last one I want to show you just right now is down at the bottom. So we've got these 2 buttons that are down here, and we've got, these are the view modes. Right, so we've got the normal view mode. That's what's on right now. That's my W keyboard shortcut. If I hit that and hit W, it goes away. Everything else goes away. And what that's doing is when I'm in normal view mode, it's showing me everything. My page, my guides, anything that I have set to not print will also show up. I can see everything I put on the page, anything that's over here in what's called the paste board. It's just sitting off to the side. But when I hit the W key, it goes into what's called preview mode, which is this button here. And it gets rid of everything that isn't set to not print. Right? So everything that's showing shows up. And this is a great way to see what your page is going to look like at the end. We've got a couple more underneath there, one called the bleed. And you notice that shows us that little extra 1/8 of an inch that we had. This is great for when you put an item in here and you want it to bleed, to actually make sure that your images are all the way out to that bleed mark. Doesn't do any good to have the bleed mark and then not actually draw your images out to the bleed mark. And I get that all the time from designers. So even then, it's hard to remember, oh yeah, I need to actually pull that out to the bleed mark as well. And the other one that we have is presentation mode. And presentation mode gets rid of absolutely everything, all your tabs and everything, and you can scroll through and look at your pages without any distractions at all. So that one's a pretty cool one. We just hit escape to get back out of there. So those are the different presentation modes. enter tools. And then when I want to put my tool bar back, I can have it floating if I like, but I'm actually going to grab it just by the gray top again, and I'm going to bring it over to this left side, and can you see where it turns blue along the left side? That just means it's ready to dock it in there. So it kind of wedges itself in there and goes back in that way. Some of the other panels that we have are the application frame. I told you when we opened it up, I'm going to actually close this file, and we see this big gray frame. That's the application frame. So it's kind of like a tray where everything is already sitting. All your panels and your documents are going to sit there. On the PC, you're probably used to this. This is what applications have always looked like. When they first changed to this on the Adobe programs, we had a little bit of a freak out as Mac users because, what do you mean I can't see my desktop back behind? This is weird. Well, we can go back to that if we like, if this freaks us out. I'll show you why I really like it actually once I got used to it. Up under the window menu, I have something called application frame. If I turn that off, now I can see my desktop. This is how I was used to seeing it as a Mac user. But why I like it is if I don't have it on, as I do now, if I do a new document, it's just sort of this floating window, right? So we're kind of used to that's how it was. But when I turn that application frame back on, and I do a new document, I'm just doing Command-N or Control-N to bring up a new one, I get a tab. And so as I create new documents, it's creating these nested tabs, kind of like tabbed browsing that we're all used to. So I like that because it's all together. The other thing is, if I have this set to fit in window like I do, and if I come down to the lower right-hand corner, not to the right-hand corner of my panels, but of my layout board here, when I grab that and make it smaller, all my documents are also getting smaller at one time. If I have those floating windows and I suddenly want to shrink each one down, I'd have to do each one individually. So that's a really handy way to do it. And because I have this application frame, it's always giving me the most space that I can for my document. And I can always come up here to the maximize window and click that, and it automatically fills everything full screen. And because I have that application frame on, as I move panels like I did with this one, it makes it bigger for me. So that's one of the great things about that application frame. Even if it did freak us out a little bit in the beginning, but we're all right now. The next panel is this control panel. So it's this thing all the way up here. I've just got all this junk across the top. And as Photoshop users, you guys here in Studio at least, are you Photoshop users, you guys are used to this. And it's a contextual menu. Whatever tool I pick, it changes. And if we don't like it, we can close that off. But I'll show you in a second how to do that. But right now I can see that if I'm on the type tool, I have type-specific information. If I grab one of my selection tools, it suddenly is looking at things like page metrics and different things, strokes and FX and things like that. So it changes depending on what tool I've chosen. If I don't like it, I have a couple different ways to get rid of it. I can either grab this teeny tiny little grab handle here and pull it off, and I can float it, so that's kind of nice. Or I can dock it in one of two places, the top where I had it, or down at the bottom. And I'm not going to do the bottom because I have my Mac dock and that just gets in the way. But I also can close that off. I can come up here to the window menu, and this is where most of our panels live. Almost all of them live here. And we have a panel called Control. So that's the Control panel. We can just click that and it'll go away. I can always bring it back the same exact way. And if I want to dock it back where it was, I'm just going to drag it up till I get the blue line up there. I'm going to weasel it in there or not. Come on, weasel in there. It's not going to even let me wedge it in there. I'm getting a spinning beach ball for some reason. We're going to leave that right there for right now. I have no idea why it wants to do that. All right, we will dock it. Yep, it is not, it's thinking about it. All right, we're just going to let that float right there. That's what we're going to do with that. And just be kind of in our way for a few minutes. That's all right. I can live with that. All right, so we're going to leave that there and see if we can figure out later why that's not docking right. So let's look at some of these other panels that are here. And actually, I'm going to close this guy because he's in my way. All right, so I'm going to look at some of the other panels that are off to the side. So as Photoshop users, like I said, you're probably used to it. But one of the things I can do is make these smaller and shrink them all the way down to icons if I want. Get them out of my way. Again, that gives me more real estate space on my board. All right, so I can pull it out, shrink it in. I also can click this teeny tiny little button. I love that the buttons are getting smaller and smaller on the panels. Pretty soon, they're just going to be 1 pixel wide, and we're going to have to find them. It'll be great. I can expand all those panels, and they become these tabbed panels. Right, so I can click on each one. This, again, any Adobe product, this looks familiar to you, I'm sure. There's a way we can handle the panels. I like to have them as icons, and I try and shrink them down, but I don't want to shrink them down too much because otherwise I have two that look exactly the same, 2 paragraph and 2 character. One of them is styles, one of them is not. So I try to pull out at least enough text to see what that actually is called. I'm just one of those people that can't identify my panels by icons. It's weird. On my desktop, I love everything to have icons. On my panels, they make no sense to me. I look at this and think, what is that trying to say? I don't know. So I like having the words on there so I can see that. So anyway, so the panels, these are here. These are set up by default. These are actually ones that I created, and I created what's called a workspace, and we'll play with that in a second as well. But I can grab panels that I want, or ones that I want. I can put them in, and if I have them in there, I can pull them out. So let's add a couple first. I'm going to go up to that window menu. Again, that's where all your panels live. And let's choose one that we know isn't open. Let's choose Folio Builder. I know that one's not open. And it's just a big panel right now. It's telling me it needs stuff, and that's fine. We're not really going to worry about what's in here. And I just want to have this panel open. So I'm just going to open that panel. Great. It's a big panel. I can't even close it. I love it. Let's put that in there. And let's also put one in here for, we'll do our scripts panel. Right, so I'll put that in there, and you notice it opened up a couple other ones. These are just ones that go together, but I didn't want those. I just wanted scripts. So I'm going to grab scripts by the tab, just grab it here on the tab name, and drag it down. And then what I'm going to do is come over to these that I don't want, and just hit the little X, close them up. All right, so I've got a panel here, and I'm going to open one more panel. Let's open up our notes panel, and do the same thing and pull that out, and close that one. And I want these two to be nested together. I like the way these are grouped, so I'm going to grab this tab and just drag it up until I get a blue line at the top there and nest those together. Now I can move these together. They make sense to me for whatever reason to have those together. I also could drag those out to the sidebar if I want to. I can grab this folio builder, let's do him, and I can pull it over here, and I get this little blue line telling me it's going to go in this new segment down here. Or I can drop it between any of the existing ones, and it will become part of that set as well. So it's a nested set. And I can say, oh, it makes sense to have Folio Builder with my swatches, or not. Let's put it down here by itself. So now it's a separate panel all by itself. That makes sense how we've nested them together? I also can pull them out and put them in as a set. So let's say I want scripts and notes to go together as a set. I would hold down the Option key on a Mac or an Alt key on the PC and pull this down and drag it over and drop it so they go together. Same thing if I want to pull them out together, I would hold down the Option key and drag them all out. Now, of course, these are the little buttoned tabs that we have. I can click that double-headed arrow and expand them back to tabs. When I get something together that I like, let's say I love the way this looks, I'm going to actually take this one and dock it at the bottom. So I'm just going to come in here. It doesn't want to dock anything for me today. It's having an issue. I should be able to dock it down here. You see a blue line at the bottom of this panel, and it will dock it. But it is not wanting to do anything with docking. It's not having any of that today, so we'll just nest those together. So let's say I laid that all out, and that's how I want my workspace to look. I want to always have those panels open. You can have different workspaces for different things you're doing. Or if you have somebody else that uses your computer, I know we don't do that very much these days, but in the old days we had to share all these computers, and you would have your different workspaces set up for yourself. I have different workspaces depending on what I'm doing. So I might have one that's just for digital publishing, and I have a lot different tabs that I would use for if I'm doing print publishing. So I can save that workspace and say, I really like the way this looks, and I'd like it to be like this when I go to work, when I work on whatever project. I like to have my tabs where I expect to see them, my panels, and know that I have all my tools ready at any time. So I can save that. I'm going to go up to this menu over here, and I'm going to say Save New Workspace. Right, so I'm just going to create a workspace, and I can give it a name, and we'll call this, let's call this creativeLIVE Demo. And I can save where my panels are sitting and any menu customization I've done. This is you can colorize certain menus. You can go in there and tell it what color you'd like a menu to be so you can find it. And I'll show you one that actually has different colored menus turned on. I'm not going to select that because I haven't done anything with the menus. And just say OK. And so now next time I go to work on something, I can just bring up that set of menus. So for instance, I'm going to switch this back over to Erica, which is my common workspace. And you notice it looks exactly the same. And that's because it brought us to the very last state that this workspace was in, which was all this messing up I did. So I have to take one more step and tell it that I want to reset it back to the way it was. And that's great, especially for me, because I'm always pulling off tabs to show you something, and then I close them and realize I really need that for the next thing. So I love to be able to go back in there and reset my workspace. So I did that. Let's go check out that one we just made, CL Demo. Bring that up. Boom, everything's where I need it to be. They have some that are built in for you, which is really nice. I think the most handy one is the new in whatever version you're in. This is great when you go to a new version and you want to see all the new items that are there or changed items. So I can say new in CS6. So it brings that up, and one of the things it does is it changes the menus, and it didn't change the menu color at all. InDesign's having a little bit of issue today. We'll see if we can figure out what those. It should show us in different colors. I'll actually turn some on manually. I was going to show you how to turn them off. I guess I'll show you how to turn them on. Under the Edit menu, down at the bottom, we have Menus. And we can come in here and we can tell it what color something is. So let's actually go, it's on defaults. It really should be colorized. I don't know why it's not, but we'll come in here and let's say we wanted to always remember where Find Font was and type. I can come over here and choose a different color. Right? So I can make that violet. So when I come up where that sits in the menu, it's suddenly colorized. So you can add your own colored menus that way. What should happen when I choose the new in CS6, let's actually reset that and see if it shows up. There we go. Just needed to reset it and clear it out. So new in CS6, you notice that there's the violet and the blue. And I can't remember which is which, but they decided that in CS6, they would show you in one color all the stuff new in CS6, and the other one is all the stuff new in CS 5.5 for whatever reason. I can't remember which is which, but they're both there, and I think it's kind of confusing, but it's nice to see that you can at least see what the new features are. Usually it's one color, everything that's new from the last version. So I'm gonna reset that and get rid of it. And when I go back to my other workspace, you notice even though I'm in Erica, I still have the colored menus on there. That's great. And even if I hit reset, they're still on there. So what I was going to show you earlier was Edit, Menus, and we're going to turn that off. We're just going to go up to the set and say InDesign Defaults, which means nothing on there. Tell it no, we don't want to save a new set. And now all our colored menus are gone again, right? The disappearing and reappearing colored menus apparently today. Does that make sense to everybody on the panels, how to move those around and how to save your workspaces? Okay, we're going to do one more thing and then we'll take a round of questions, I think, if we have any. So the last thing I want to show you is keyboard shortcuts. How many people use keyboard shortcuts? Excellent. Anytime you can keep your hands on the keyboard is a good thing. The great thing about InDesign is it lets you customize nearly all your keyboard shortcuts, and I love that, especially because some of the keyboard shortcuts make no sense to me whatsoever. Or in the case of a couple versions ago, they changed a keyboard shortcut that had been there forever. And I thought they'd gotten rid of the feature because I had never actually chosen the feature from the menu. I had only ever used the keyboard shortcut. So I thought it was gone and I freaked out. It was step and repeat. I use step and repeat all the time. It just turns out they changed the keyboard shortcut. So I went back in and stole my keyboard shortcut back. So I'm going to show you how to do that. Under the Edit menu, right down by menus where we just were, under keyboard shortcuts, you can customize your shortcuts. Now the great thing is it's got the default set, but I can also choose PageMaker or QuarkXPress shortcuts. So if you're coming from one of those programs recently, where you've actually still remember, you still have that memory, reflex in there, or as I like to call it, E-flex, where you just remember, which keys to push, you can choose one of those. Otherwise, we can start from scratch and just make some changes. So what I want to do, there's a couple that don't have keyboard shortcuts by default, and I want them to have them. And it's under the Type menu. So I'm just going out. I can't actually choose anything because I've got this dialog box open. But under the Type menu, there's an operation called Find Font, and that shows you all the fonts that are used in your document. I use that a lot. I don't like having to come down to the menu item for that. So we're going to assign a keyboard shortcut to that. And the other one is all the way at the bottom of the Type menu that says Fill with Placeholder Text. So if I create a text frame, and I just want to fill in some dummy text, I want a keyboard shortcut for that. I don't want to have to go all the way up to the top menu and all the way down. I know that sounds like a lot, but when you're doing that all day long, that's a lot of mousing, right? So I want a keyboard shortcut for that as well. So those are the two we're going to assign. So we're in the keyboard shortcuts dialog box, and all I need to do is just start making changes, and it will create a new set or ask me if I want to create a new set. So I need to choose where this item lives. So the product area, the first few are the menus, and those are the menus that are across the top here. So it says, does it live in a menu? If it does, choose one of these. Some things don't live in a menu, just, object editing or scripts or something like that. They just kind of live out there. The tools live in its own toolbar. So I can change those tools if I don't like that W. If I want to add a modifier key so I don't just type a letter and have it suddenly do something for me, I can put that there. But our stuff lives in the Type menu. So I'm going to go into the Type menu, and then it's all alphabetical from here, which is really nice, easier to find. So I'm going to come here and say Find Font. I'm just going to click on it, and I can see that nothing is assigned to that. There's no keyboard shortcut assigned to that at all. So I want to assign one. I'm going to come down here to the new shortcut field. And I'm just going to key in the shortcut. I'm just going to actually do it. Right? So in this case, I'm going to put F3. So I'm just going to hit my F3 key. And it's not going to work either, so I'm going to have to do something else. Let's see. I have to change my, my settings on my Mac. The keyboard shortcut, let's do something else. Let's make it, oh, I don't know. Let's see if one's available. That's what we'll actually have to check. If I key in, let's say, Apple E. If I do that, it's going to tell me Command E is already assigned to export. So this is where we have to keep finding one that we can use again and again. So I'm actually going to try, let's just try Command 8. See if we, okay, here we go. Command 9, we found one. I'll have to remember that. All right, so Command 9, it tells me it's unassigned. So this is what you have to do. And the one thing you don't want to do when you're changing and trying to find a different keyboard shortcut, for instance, when I said Command E, and it's not, it's already assigned to something else, I obviously don't want to assign that because it will strip it away from the other item that's there. So you can do that if you look at it and go, I would never use that, you know, then that's where my step and repeat keyboard shortcut went to. It's something I don't think I've ever used. I'm not going to use that. I'm going to steal it back. So we'll strip it away. You can't end up playing leapfrog if you're not careful. So in this case, I would just say instead of delete and add a new keyboard shortcut, I just want to key in the new shortcut. Because if I hit delete, it thinks that's what I want to assign as my keyboard shortcut. So let's go back to that Command or Control 9 here. Nothing assigned. That's good. It's not assigned to anything. So I'm just going to click Assign. Now it tells me I can't modify the default set. That's good. Do you want to create a new set? Yes, I do. So we'll create this new one, and we'll call it also CL Demo. And now I have that keyboard shortcut assigned. Even if I go to the Type menu and look at the Find Font, it should be showing me that. And it's not. It should be showing me that it's actually already there. Find Font, it should say Command 9 in here. So we'll see if we can figure out why it's not doing that. Let's just say OK. And then we'll just see if I hit Command 9, what happens. Command 9 opens up the Find Font dialog box. Not sure why it wasn't showing in here, but here it is now. It's saying Command 9. Let's go back in there and do one other thing under the Edit menu. And we'll come down here to Keyboard Shortcuts. And we will come down to the Type menu. And I want to do Fill with Placeholder Text. And I was going to do F2, but I'm sure my keyboard, there we go. F2 is working just fine. Why, I don't know the other one was. All right, F2 is unassigned. I'm going to go ahead and assign that. Fill with placeholder text should now show me F2 down below. And just to fix that, I'm going to go to Find Font and try that F3 again. Yeah, F3 doesn't want to work. That's all right. Just thought I'd try that. All right, so at least now I have my keyboard shortcuts set up. F2 and Control 9 are there. All right, so those are keyboard shortcuts that we assign. We can have those set up for ourselves and be able to work a lot quicker. So I'm glad you guys all use keyboard shortcuts. You don't know how many people that I see that don't ever use any keyboard shortcuts. And so maybe it's a Photoshop thing, right? All right, cool. Does that make sense to everybody, how to do the keyboard shortcuts? All right, one last thing before we take a couple questions. We need to save our file. Now, granted, we don't have anything in here. So I'm just going to do something a little quickly. I'm going to use that keyboard shortcut we just did. We just did the Fill with Placeholder Text. Boom, we have some placeholder text. So we at least have something to save because I want to save this file out. So if I hit Command or Control S, it's going to automatically come up with the Save As dialog box, or I can choose that from the menu. Let's save it as something. I'm going to save it out to the desktop. And I have an option for the format. I have a couple different options in CS6. So I have a document, I have a template, I have what's called IDML. We're going to talk about that at the very end of the day, so we're not even going to worry about that. So by default, it's set to save it as an InDesign CS6 document. And it gives it that INDD extension, InDesign document. And that's what we want. We'll save that first, and we'll talk about templates in a second. So I'm going to save that out. We'll go out to our desktop and look at that. It's just like we expected. That's what it looked like before. You notice it says untitled, INDD, but I also have this weird thing sitting over here. It's a little white file, and it says lock. And it's an IDLK file. This is one of those peripheral files I talked about. It's an InDesign locked file. And what happens is when I have a file open, I still have that file open even though I saved it, it creates this lock file, and it basically is creating a history. It's kind of like the history panel in Photoshop, where it keeps track of everything you've done, only it creates a separate file and throws it in the same folder. But as soon as I close this file, let's close up our Untitled 8 document, that file is magically gone, right? It's keeping track of it. That's great in case InDesign or your computer crashes. It has auto document recovery, and that's what that's for. So don't do anything with that file, just ignore it. It's gonna, just make a weird file name that almost looks like the file you're working on, and that's gonna have some gobbledygook after it. And that's a quote, by the way, gobbledygook. It's a technical term. right, so I'm going to come in here and I'm going to open up that same document we just had. So again, now I'm navigating out. I did Command or Control O to open, and I'm going to go out to that untitled document. And I want to save it as a template, all right? So what a template is that it's going to open up and have the structure if you're going to use the same file over and over again. So for instance, if I had like a newsletter and I did August newsletter, and instead of opening August newsletter next time and changing everything, because then you might get save happy and hit save and realize now you just ruined your only copy of the August newsletter, we want to make what's called a template so that we have the structure there, and next time we open it, it opens up a new untitled document and you're leaving your August newsletter alone. So usually what I do is I would take, say, the August one and get rid of everything except all the frames, and we'll learn about all the frames in just a second. But I get rid of everything that's there and save it as a template. So I'm going to do File, and I'm going to do Save As, and instead of choosing Document, I'm going to choose Template. That gives us an INDT extension, and I'll hit Save. And we'll look at what that looks like. It looks a little different. I'm not really excited about the icon in CS6. It used to look like a little legal pad. That made sense. It was a template. We're going to keep pulling off a sheet and working from it. Looks a little weird now, but that's all right. We can still see the extension as INDT. But what makes that special is that when I double click on this file here, it opens up a new untitled document. So it didn't open up Untitled 8. Sorry, it's just called Untitled. It opened up Untitled 10, but it's new. And when I hit save, if I get save happy, I start changing and hit Command or Control S to save. It's a new thing, and it says, hey, you want to save this as something so you don't accidentally overwrite anything. So it saves it as a new untitled INDD document. Does that make sense? All right, cool. So let's close those up. Oops, let's close those and close that. And I'm going to take questions. Any questions on anything that we've gone over? How it looks, how to save it, how to open it? Anybody here? Throw it open to the internet, I guess.
We've got
Do we have
plenty
questions?
of internet questions
Excellent.
out to you, yeah.
I thought we
So
might.
people are really digging this, I can tell, because we have questions pouring in. Let's start with this one from Pegweather. Can keyboard shortcuts be exported to another computer, or do you have to set them up individually again?
Yes, you can export them, actually. You can save the set. So if we go into our keyboard shortcuts and we open up the set, we can actually save the set, show set. We can either take this set that's here, it just opens it up in your text editor, and it's a beautifully designed document of all your keyboard shortcuts. But you can also grab the file. It just creates an XML file. And I'm sorry, I forget where it goes because they keep moving it. It's probably in your library, application support, or your preferences somewhere in there. But it will be an XML file, and you can actually look for it by the name of your file. So I could look up CL demo in Spotlight if I'm on a Mac and find it that way.
Okay.
But yeah, where it lives is sometimes confusing for me because everything, it nestles things away throughout the system. But
Better
yes.
than doing it manually, though.
Exactly. Yep. You just take that file, you put it in the same place on your friend's computer, and then they have the same keyboard shortcuts.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, question from our own CL Jessica. She's wondering if you can export your workspace, correct? And she's wondering if you ever share your favorite workspace setups.
If I ever share no, I hadn't, because it's more of a preference. I mean, it's the ones that I use all the time, but it's easily something I could share. Yeah, I mean, hit me up for it if you want to. Or, yeah, I mean, it's not something that I normally share. It's just I do it when I move from computer to computer, or also from version to version. Because when you create a new version, you don't have any of those spaces, and you have to actually move them over for you. So I share them with myself, I guess.
Excuse me. So we had a couple people interested in how you change increments when you're opening a new document. I know you went through that, and they were wondering if you could show how to do that again, or say how to do that again.
How to change it to a different unit?
Yeah. So
it's under preferences.
Okay.
Sorry, unless you had more. Did you have more to?
No.
Okay, cool. So under preferences, whether it's under InDesign on a Mac or Edit on a PC, and then you come down to units and increments, and then open up the horizontal and vertical rulers, and change that to whatever it is you want to use. And again, with the preferences, you want to make sure you do it with no document open. Otherwise, you're only changing the preference for the currently open document. So this opens it for all new ones. Now, anything you already had open will still have those old increments. So it might still be in picas and points, but you can change that for that particular document.
Okay, great.
Shamrock Quinn from Philly, says hi from Philly. So once you close your document, you lose that locked autosave document?
Yes, it goes away. Yep, the document goes away. It's just keeping track while it's open, so in case there's a crash or something like that.
Okay.
But yeah, it just kind of goes away. Don't touch it. Don't throw it away, unless you don't have InDesign running and you still have that locked document. I've seen that happen once a long time ago, and I threw it away because I couldn't open the file because it was saying it's open already. It was, but for the most part, don't touch that file. It just kind of appears, but it confuses people, so I like to point it out. So
Cool.
We've got one from earlier when you were first beginning, and this one comes from Stephen SMM. Michelle from New Jersey. She asks, if your design has facing pages, can you export that to a single page format when you're exporting to PDF?
yes, you can.
Okay.
Yep. We'll talk about that too in the afternoon
Oh,
when we go to, or tomorrow
great.
afternoon when we export.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Fantastic.
Yep, it's more of a just to how it looks on screen to you, but it gives you some other options that I'll show you if you don't have facing pages turned on. There's a few things you can't do, and we'll look at that when we get to
Okay.
that.
Okay, will you be covering and going into more detail for templates? There's a lot of questions streaming in about
If we
templates.
have time, I might be able to, but yeah, we weren't gonna really cover that.
Okay.
Because this is like the intro to InDesign class. But yeah, I can go over it a little bit more if we have time. So.
Okay, great. There were a couple people in the chat rooms. Sally Griswold is one of them, and wondering if you could tell and share again how to create that outer line of the document when you were first setting up.
The bleed?
It's the bleed line.
Yeah,
and
the bleed
page
line, yeah. It's just down here. If you don't see it at the bottom, if you don't see bleed and slug, you want to make sure that you click this more options button, because that's what it's
Okay.
going to look like right out of the box. So you say more options, and it's down here, and just put in the value. And 1/8 of an inch is pretty standard. The other thing I didn't mention, that if you don't know your fractions, you can always do 1/8 and hit tab, and it actually does the math for you as well. InDesign does math, which I love. Because I don't like math very much, and well, I do, but I don't like to admit it. And so if I want to come in, and I can do that and add math in there anyway. And so while I'm in there, I'll show you that. If you had 8.5 inches, but you knew you needed to be a little bit more, or it's, someone says extended by a centimeter, which sounds weird, but let's say they did that, or 2 centimeters, I can do plus 2 centimeters. I'm sorry, let's actually put a plus in there. Plus 2 centimeters, and hit tab, and it actually adds it for you and converts it all to inches for you. And InDesign CS6 actually can do more complex math. And again, if I knew more complex math, I would show you. But up until that point, it could only do one thing at a time, plus this, whatever. So I use that all the time for fractions, because I don't remember 15/16 ever. So I do 15/16 all the time and put that in there. So yeah, so that's how we do the bleed that's in here. And again, keep all measurements the same. If you want it the same bleed all the way around, you make sure this is selected. Otherwise, you have to enter each one individually.
Very cool. That's exactly what they needed.
Excellent.
on the internet.
Cool.
Thank
Very
you.
good.
And
All
what a
right.
cool option that you can put in fractions.
Exactly.
in this
That's
program.
really handy,
It's kinda
especially if it's some really weird amount, Yeah, it's nice to be able to do it. But yeah, I can do more, like you can say plus this, like I always, if I knew it was 8.5 inches plus 3¼ inches, I would have to figure out, what the fraction was first. Obviously I know a quarter, but let's say it was something else. And I would have to do that first and then do the add and do it all together. And now InDesign does that all for you.